Now we get to meet one of our neighbors for the first time. Downstairs in this building, the office of Congressman Jackson, representative of North Carolina's 37th, 14th, excuse me, that was the old one, 14th, which encompasses a bit of Charlotte. So please, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, sitting Congressman, candidate for Attorney General.
Thank you.
Mr. Jeff Jackson.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Pretty good. I am your neighbor, and this is my first time I've been able to stop by and say hello, but it's been on the calendar and I've been looking forward to it. So, hello, it's good to see you all. Not my first time joining you, but first time joining you since I've been your member of Congress, depending on where you live. The district, by the way, 14th, is the bottom half of Mecklenburg and about 75% of Gaston County, or at least it will be through the rest of this term. It was just redrawn last week. It was split into 3 different pieces. One of those pieces is going to go out east, one of those pieces is going to go west, one of those pieces was absorbed into Alma Adams' district. Alma Adams is going to go from winning in a landslide to winning in the mother of all landslides in the next election. Her district is now about 75-25. So this was done, as they say, the folks in the state legislature readily admit, for partisan purposes to make sure that they could pick up more seats. So you've got 14 members of Congress in North Carolina. Currently there is a 7-7 split. After the next election, it will be either 10-4 or 11-3, depending on some court action. The one competitive race is out east, currently represented by Don Davis. He and I served together in the state senate. He succeeded G.K. Butterfield, for those of you who know his legacy. So Don Davis is in a roughly 50-50 seat. It'll be the only competitive congressional race if these maps are allowed to stand, and the court's going to take a look at that. So it's a really bad situation. We weren't shocked. We sort of figured that this was coming because the state Supreme Court flipped in the last election and they made a ruling that basically political gerrymandering is no longer against the law in North Carolina. The federal courts several years ago made a similar ruling. So the only form of gerrymandering that is still against the law is racial gerrymandering. And you've seen some headlines in the last few months about federal courts overturning certain maps in Georgia and Alabama. We may have a ruling in South Carolina and Louisiana. That's all racial gerrymandering. Those rulings are good, positive, although the Supreme Court may be taking a look at those. And the reason why Don Davis's district may get judicial review is there may be a racial gerrymandering argument to make there. So that's everything that's happening for North Carolina congressional maps. The state legislative districts were also redrawn, so your state house, state senate, in a way that will make it much more difficult to elect members of one party versus the other. The whole question in the next election will be, does the current supermajority still stand? By a vote of 1, there is a majority, there's a supermajority in the state legislature that's capable of overriding the governor's vetoes. So the question in this election won't end up being who's in the majority, but will be whether or not the current majority maintains its supermajority. So that's the situation. I'm still your member of Congress. We have a staff here in this building. We have another staff that operates out of Gaston County, and it is my pleasure to serve. We will be doing everything that you expect from a member of Congress for the duration of my term. As was mentioned, I did announce for Attorney General last week. I'm an attorney in good standing, and I'm happy to talk about that. Also happy to talk about what's going on in Congress. The government is set to shut down in about 17 days. It will be very close. It will be a close call. I can't predict what will happen, but there is a very good chance of a government shutdown in 17 days, at least 50%, if not higher. Got a few minutes? Happy to talk about anything that you all would like to talk about.
Thank you for such a hopeful speech. Man, it's tough. Ooh, so let me ask you this. I have a question. When it comes to gerrymandering, you mentioned there's some courts overturning saying that it's race-based. We all know that it's race-based, but of course you can call a muffin a cupcake.
Yep.
So what is it actually that you're looking for that will prove that the case?
All right, so that's a great question. The courts have a precedent as far as what they are looking for. It has to do with what's something called the vowed level, black voting age population. And once it hits certain critical thresholds, then that activates certain levels of judicial review. And so with the one district where this would really apply, which is Don Davis's district, out in the northeastern part of the state, historical agriculture part of the state, they were very clever in making it so that it just barely leans his way by about 1 point. They're doing that hoping to get around judicial review. So we shall see.
We got a question from Shay.
Thank you for coming. I watch your stuff on the internet. It's always great information. I just, in this room, we talk a ton about voting and getting people out to do that, informing folks. What's your advice on activating this community as a whole to understand that their votes are the things that are going to really prevent such dire situations as you're explaining today?
I know my initial remarks weren't particularly helpful, but I actually am pretty energized about the potential for this election in every respect other than the congressional races. Congressional races are toast, okay? But the state legislative races, the potential for breaking supermajority, very, very high. The potential for winning a really important gubernatorial election. The most high-profile governor's race in the country will be in North Carolina. We are likely to win. I would bet on us. A number of council of state positions, not just AG, but LG, where we are, if not favored, at least 50-50. We are going to have a ton of energy within the state and at the state level. And then you add to that one big cherry on top. We're the only state that Biden lost that he has any chance of winning. We're the only state he can flip. Not Florida, not Iowa. It's just us. So we just shot to the very top of the priority list for the president's reelect. And we are going to see an amazing amount of investment. And some of that you're not going to like, because it's going to take the form of a bunch of mail, clogging up your mailbox, and a bunch of TV ads, and a bunch of radio ads. But it's also going to take the form of a lot of infrastructure building that the local party apparatus just can't afford anymore. What I'm telling you is, you're about to see a wave of energy hit North Carolina, and a lot of it's going to be really positive.
We have a question from Ms. Faith Triggs.
Can you talk about the Speaker Johnson and short-term, long-term disaster benefits to the Democratic Party and what that's going to look like long-term with the 2024 election?
Mike Johnson is our new speaker. He was the 4th person to put himself forward and be the speaker designate and actually become speaker this year. I've taken 19 votes for speaker, by the way. It's usually 1, so that's different. I had to Google the guy, and there was not a lot to learn. He's got a very short Wikipedia page. So my first impression of him is that he is temperamentally very pleasant and ideologically very extreme, and it's going to be a question of which of those two win out. I think the ideologically extreme part is going to win out because the people who enabled him to ascend to the speakership are the extremes within the majority party. They have decided to give him a little bit of leeway in negotiating things like the budget, more leeway than they were going to give McCarthy, because Johnson is considered further to the right than McCarthy is. This guy's sort of equidistant between the MAGA right and the McCarthy folks, who were like pure establishment. He's sort of like dead center in between those two camps, which is why they sort of settled on him. I think he's going to have a reasonable chance of convincing the extremes to go along with some type of responsible keeping of the government open, but not any more than 50%. And beyond that, it's pretty hard for me to forecast what it's going to be like. I think we're going to have a ton of information about this guy in about 10 days, because he has to make a decision about, does he want to keep the government open and risk his speakership like McCarthy did, or does he want to fold with the extremes and just shut everything down? It will be his call to make.
The gentleman in the tan shirt.
Glad you're here. Bolin McClung from Pineville. So, as an AG, what will your involvement be in the Leandro case?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not sure what the AG's involvement has been to date with the litigation. There's been litigation for a couple of decades about this. In general, the AG's job is to defend the state. I believe Leandro is suing the state in order to rectify a wrong. We have protection in our state constitution for sound basic education. I support the fundamental premise of the Leandro case, that we have failed in providing funding requisite to meet the constitutional obligation that we have of a sound basic education. However, there are going to be a lot of times, if I'm fortunate enough to be Attorney General, where I'm defending something I don't like. And that has to be the job, that has to be the approach, otherwise the system doesn't work. I'm not sure where that's going to fall. I think that the Attorney General is not currently the one bringing the case, however.
Let me ask you, how will your political brand change? We know you for transparency, TikTok. However, Attorney General seems like a space that's more tight-lipped. Will that change if you are elected to be our next Attorney General?
I'll tell you, the only concern I have about that is the level of natural interest in the day-to-day work of an Attorney General is probably lower than that of a member of Congress. The reason why some of our updates have gotten a lot of traction are because they link up with things that are already in your head because you see them in the national press. The stuff that the Attorney General is working on, certainly on the state level, is not going to be in the national press generally. So the level of natural interest is going to be lower. I am more than happy to continue to do a weekly update about here's what I'm doing, and I would love for people to be interested. I think what's more likely is just that the natural level of interest will drop, not that my transparency will drop. Because the communication part of the job is fun. Telling everybody here's the most interesting thing that happened this week, and then reading all the feedback, that's become a great part of this job in and of itself that I really enjoy. But I'm under no illusions that y'all are really looking to see what the AG is doing every single day, like people are reading about Congress every single day. There aren't as many personalities involved in the North Carolina Department of Justice as there are in the United States Congress. I know that.
We have Dr. Blanchpin.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
I guess my question, we were talking about this at the end of our last meeting, Jackie, myself, and the facilitators. We were talking about accountability, and we were talking about promises. And so a lot of times we have people come in and then they promise certain things, and then when we look at their records and stuff, the promises either broken or not done at all. So in this new position, did you get that, Attorney General? What would be your promise? What would be something that you would say to us that we can hold you accountable for?
There is an R or a D next to the job on the ballot. I'll be honest with you, I don't think there should be. It's a law enforcement job. I think the approach needs to be nonpartisan. I think when we put someone in a position of power over us, a law enforcement position of power, we really want them to have no partisan incentive one way or the other. So this job is different than a lieutenant governor, certainly a governor, who's going to bring very specific legislative advocacy. However, it is appropriate and necessary for the Attorney General to also occasionally be a legislative advocate when there are legislative matters that concern the safety of the state with respect to clean water, clean air, corporations that are treating people unfairly with price gouging, organized crime. The fentanyl epidemic is a major problem. I think you can expect those to be priorities from my office. Fentanyl in particular, y'all. If y'all haven't been touched by it, if your family hasn't been touched by it, then that's rare at this point. It is a true epidemic in our state. It's to be understood slightly different than the opioid epidemic, which was more of addiction. This is a poison epidemic because it's incredibly inexpensive for the cartels to manufacture. And they're lacing it with everything. Even drugs that aren't billing themselves as opioids are being laced with fentanyl, and we are having overdose deaths in North Carolina every single day. So I guess the short answer to your question is you can certainly count on me to make the fentanyl epidemic a very top priority.
Before we go to our next question, I wanted to ask, just kind of to piggyback, how do you know who you're getting when it comes to judicial races? If you take away the R or the D, like how do you suggest the voters vet who they're voting for?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I mean, the R or D does provide you some information, and people value that information. I think that's outweighed by the political incentives that come with being an R or a D as a judge, as well as the money, often dark money, that floods into judicial races once you introduce an R or a D. We're the only state in the country in the last 100 years that went from nonpartisan judicial races to partisan judicial races. It happened just a few years ago, and it was because one party thought they would have an electoral advantage. If you create a partisan affiliation, you are going to create partisan incentives for judicial behavior. I don't have a good answer to the question of how can we inform people about who these judicial candidates are. People have no idea who these judicial candidates are. None. They can convey zero information about any of them, and they just vote party line. We might need a better way to pick judges. Some states do it differently when it comes to picking judges.
Now we have a question I think it's already being asked. Then we're going to go to Tommy Robinson.
Hi, Adrienne Frenzel. I'm coming today as a mom and a healthcare provider and an advocate for gun violence prevention. So thank you for all of your support of the gun safety legislation. I was fortunate to be in your office on the 19th lobbying for gun safety legislation with 100 other healthcare providers across the nation. And so I'm asking today, in your role as potential Attorney General, knowing that firearms are the #1 killer of our children, knowing that firearm injury and death disproportionately affects our Black and Brown communities, can you speak to what roles you can take as an Attorney General to address that?
Great question. And I've been on the gun violence prevention task force in Congress since I first arrived there, supporting all the legislation that I think would actually really help save some lives. Been deeply frustrating from a legislative standpoint for many years. One thing that the Attorney General can do is serve a critical coordinating function with local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and federal law enforcement in order to create priorities, in order to create systems of accountability. This is an area where you need priorities, you need systems of accountability. There is no one lever the Attorney General gets to pull in this space, but within the office, which is the state's largest law firm, you can let law enforcement know this is going to be a key priority, and then you can work to hold people accountable. I think there's a lot to be said for political leadership in the space. I think there's a lot to be said for an Attorney General who will step out and say, this needs to be a high priority for law enforcement.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes. How do you vote if you're not a Democrat, if you're not a Republican? How do you vote? What are you?
Oh, I'm a registered Democrat, sir.
Oh, thank you.
That was quicker than I expected. Let's see. Let's talk about your in your run for Attorney General. Again, that's the state's top attorney. How would you advise big corporations who want to move to the South, and namely North Carolina, for those incentives that seemingly restrict employers in mass, again, insurance, workers' rights? How would you enforce that companies should still move to a state like North Carolina while still ensuring that employees are protected?
It's a fair question. The Attorney General isn't going to be consulted to be clear, when a company is looking at moving to North Carolina and applying for incentives. I don't think the Attorney General is typically a part of that conversation, but I do believe the Attorney General plays a role in establishing a culture and putting companies on notice that we are a state where, at least I, would enforce and expect a level of fair treatment for employees. Everybody knows when a signal gets sent from political leaders as to what is going to be tolerated when it comes to the treatment of employees. When political leaders in South Carolina tell prospective employers, hey, we're not really that concerned with how you treat employees, when they send that signal, everybody hears it. From prospective companies to existing management. We want a different culture. We want to foster a different set of expectations in North Carolina for how employees are to be treated. I do think the Attorney General can play a role in that.
All right, we have Ms. Faith Triggs.
Can you talk a little bit about, as we kind of move through the budget issues, the wars we got going on, Israel, Hamas, how are we gonna afford to do all this stuff? And what positive message can you send to American citizens to stay the course for the next year? Because it's kind of a tough time.
On the budget, I don't have a positive message. My message is one of concern. We have a debt problem in this country. There is absolutely no question about it. We're getting very close to spending on the interest alone, everything we spend on national defense, which is huge. Added to which, you could zero out national defense and not come close to solving the deficit. It's a worse problem than people realize, no matter how big you think the problem is. It is bigger. And I don't think either party really is in a place to address this seriously. That said, I agree with Mitch McConnell's case about why we need to continue to support Ukraine. He says, look, for a fraction of what we spend on our military, we are telling Ukraine, you can purchase weapons from us. We sell them, often our old stuff. We use the funds to replenish our supply, then we give them that, and they defend themselves from what would be a mass slaughter if we didn't step in. And for some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, we say they're tired of it. I say, I want you to imagine the alternative, where we stop the support, we essentially step aside, and then you have to watch what happens to all of these kids. A lot of kids. Russia's kidnapped 20,000 kids and put them on trains and send them to Russia and force them into adopted families and change their names. And they'll never be found, even after the conflict. That's exactly the type of person, the type of force that Ukraine is trying to defend itself against. And if we were in their shoes, we would be doing the exact same thing in defending ourselves, and we would be hoping that our allies would stick by us. Added to which, we told Ukraine that we would do this in the 90s when we convinced them to give up their nuclear weapons. They said, we don't want to give them up, because if we do, Russia will attack. We said, no, give them up, and we'll protect you. They did. There are just a lot of reasons to stand by these folks in the hour of the deepest, darkest need you could ever imagine. And Europe's doing their job. Europe's put almost $100 billion on the table. It's not just us, and they've taken a ton of the refugees. We have a global alliance to get this thing done. Think I have time for one more?
Before we close out, I would like for you to elaborate, tell North Carolinians, you're mentioning of Joe Biden having the potential to win this state and what that will bring. What does that look like for us beyond the mail? What opportunities are there? What should we advocate for while all of this political attention is on this day? How should we leverage what's coming?
I try to shy away from exaggerated statements. I try not to be Mr. Hyperbole, but the difference between the two likely nominees is extraordinary. And when people say our democracy is on the line, I don't think that's an exaggeration. It may have been at some point. I don't think it is now. I think there is no real interest by the likely Republican nominee in hearing the public or in obeying the customs of our democracy. I think there is a concerted effort to circumvent and maintain power at all costs. And that alone should be sufficient to get everyone's attention and make it very easy for them to decide how they're going to vote. As far as legislative accomplishments, I think if you look at last year and you look at the major investments we were able to make through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the CHIPS and Science Bill, and through the infrastructure bill, you're seeing an enormous amount of investment in communities all across the state, including this one, that would not have happened were it not for this president.
Thank you. So we want to close us out with a statement.
Looking forward to coming back. Thank you so much.
Congressman Jeff Jackson.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, we have time for a few announcements. If you would like to make an announcement. Next Tuesday, there will not be a forum. It is election day. Go vote if you haven't already. If there are no announcements, or if you have an announcement, please send them to Steve at S. Johnson at Tuesday Forum Charlotte. On the 14th, which will be our next forum, our presenter will be here to discuss Medicare. With that said, if our head, minds and hearts are clear, Dr. Thomas, please have a good view. Gentlemen, I guess